Hello, in this lesson we are going to be going over very briefly what kind of data types Python has. Now, as you know, every programming language has certain data types and Python is no different, it has some data types. The reason we want to know about these data types is that in Python everything is an object and each object therefore has certain methods associated. So once we know what kind of data type we are dealing with, we are able to more effectively use those methods. The reason Python has these data types in the first place is because as all programming languages, different data types are handled differently by the computers. So for example, when we have numbers, they could be integers, they are differently treated than compared to floating point numbers. The representation in the memory is different, and this is done so that more efficient use of our computing resources can be made. So let's get to it. So what are the various kinds of data types that Python has? We have text data types called strings. Now strings in Python are unique because they are immutable, so they cannot be changed, and also Python doesn't have a character data type separately, so even a single character will be stored as a string. Next we have numerical data types, and these could be integers or floating point numbers, or they could be complex numbers. Now complex numbers are imaginary numbers and they are represented using the letter I, which stands for iota, and they are imaginary because they are square roots of negative numbers, and these are used in advanced mathematical calculations. Most of the time we will not be dealing with complex numbers, we will just be dealing with integers or floating point numbers. Then Python has sequence types or iterables. These are structures which you can go through one by one and access them in that way. So there's something called list. Python maintains something called list, which is represented by box brackets and the elements within the list separated by commas. A list is equivalent to an array in other languages, and it is ordered. Indexing begins at 0 like all other situations in Python. You can also have tuples, which are almost exactly the same as lists, except that tuples are immutable, so you cannot change tuples. Lists can, however, be changed. Values can be assigned to index positions. A range is a special feature in Python. Now a range specifies, for example, you can have a range from 0 to 10. The way it stores in memory is it's going to store the starting and the end point and also the step, but not the intermediate numbers. So for example, if you have a range of 0 to 10 or a list which contains the number 0 to 10, they will serve the same purpose, but it's memory efficient in longer ranges. So if you want to have a range of 0 to a million, for example, now a range can be stored very simply just by storing the 0 and the million points. But if you were to have a range in the form of a list, you would have to specify each and every number. So that is going to take up a lot of memory. So if you are using a range or a list to iterate over something, it makes much more sense to have a range. And Python supports conversions very well, so you can always convert from a range to a list, and that is no trouble at all. So ranges are used to improve the memory performance of Python functions. Next we come to another special function, data type called a dict or a dictionary. A dictionary is special because it has a key value pair, and it can be used to create different structures by itself. Advanced libraries such as pandas can use dictionary structures to make data frames. You can pass in the dictionary which contains the column as the key and a series as the list of values. So dictionaries are useful that way. It is possible to iterate over dictionaries using either the keys or even the values. The only thing with dictionaries is the keys cannot be repeated. So keys have to be unique, the values can be repeated. Then we come to sets. Now if you remember your mathematical theory, sets are collections of objects, and the special feature about sets is that they do not contain duplicates. Another way that sets are different from lists would be that sets are not ordered. So you cannot access elements of a set using the indexing function. In general, sets can be changed. You can add elements or you can remove elements from a set, but you can also have a frozen set in which then that becomes an immutable structure. Then you have booleans, which are present in all programming languages. A boolean type is either a true or a false value. So the actual representation is Python is true and false with a capital letter. However, there are something we call as truthy values. So these are values which can be converted to Boolean. For example, the number 1 can be converted to Boolean value true. Similarly, 0 can be interpreted as a false value. And there are many other values which can have a similar status. So these are called truthy values. Remember to capitalize. And finally, we come to binary types, which are very rarely used in mainstream programming. However, they're still used, so it's good to know that they exist. You can get the data type of any object by using the type function. And if you pass x is equal to 5, for example, I'm assigning an integer value here, and if I type print type of x, then it returns a class to me, and the class is integer. But we will be going over these data types in more detail in subsequent videos. So take care, and I'll see you then.